Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU and Big 12. And today we are going to preview this weekend's matchup with BYU at Arizona State with Mark from the Stomp the Bus podcast, one of our fellow members of the College Huddle community. So, Mark, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This should be fun.
Yeah, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We do this each week. We bring in another guest from around the College Huddle to preview the upcoming matchups, as well as additional content, live reactions after games, and so on. So be sure to like this video and subscribe so you catch all of that. So now that we got the housekeeping out of the way, Mark, let's jump right into it. So ASU, like BYU, has definitely overachieved from where they were predicted to go this season. So tell me what it's been like for ASU fans seeing their team outperform expectations.
Yeah, well, it's kind of been a gradual process, right? And I'm sure this was similar to BYU this year. It's really started to kick into overdrive this past week after the win at Kansas State. That's the hype and everything is really starting to build after that, because before that game, like all of the wins were impressive in their own right. And the win over Utah at the time was a big win, just considering ASU got beat 55-3 by Utah last year. So it was good to just beat them. But as the season went on, Utah's overall record gets worse and worse. So up until the Kansas State game, ASU hadn't beaten a team, or at least a Big 12 team that had a winning record. So, and some of that's just the bottom half of the Big 12 is just not that good this year. There's just no way around it. But ASU's been able to, avoid enough mistakes, and they really have grown as the year has gone on. Early in the year, I think people really knew this team wasn't going to be a repeat of the last 2 years in that Wyoming game to open the year. Now, it turns out Wyoming is much worse than we thought as well, but it was still like ASU still dominated Wyoming and did it in a way that, like, you've probably seen this with BYU over the years. Like, sometimes these games you're supposed to win are much close, it's like a 10-point game in the fourth quarter, and you're just there like, what? Like, now we just have to win. Now there's no style points. It was nice to just like beat the crap out of a team. So that was a good first step. It turns out beating Mississippi State really didn't gain us that much.
Right.
That was actually Sam Levitt's worst game of the year. He missed a bunch of throws in the second half because they were just running the ball so often, because Mississippi State literally just couldn't. I believe they had 3 down linemen, so it was just bad coaching and bad talent, and ASU was able to capitalize on that. The Texas State win was kind of the second checkpoint, because a lot of decent ASU teams, back half of the Todd Graham era, the beginning of the Herm Edwards era, before everything fell apart, they would have these nice wins at home, and then they'd go on the road and play a good group of 5 team like Texas State. Or in the past, it would be like San Diego State or something, and they'd lose. And it's like, oh, okay, this team's not that good, But they were able to kind of grind out a win in San Marcos, get to 3-0. That was enormous, because, again, going into the year, it's like, let's just get to a bowl game, And getting through that non-con, which didn't include an FCS team, entering the year, that non-con looked a lot more difficult than it actually was. Mm-hmm. To get to 3-0 was enormous. You go on the road, you lose at Texas Tech.
I'm going to actually pull it up while you're going through it. I want to, because I was looking at this as you were talking through it. So yeah, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. You go on the road at Texas Tech, kind of an expected loss, honestly. It was a weird game. They kind of had a few missed fourth downs early in the game that kind of changed the trajectory of how it went. But it's not like they were completely overmatched. They get a bye week, host Kansas. Kansas is a weird team, and it was probably ASU's worst defensive game of the year, even though they've allowed 31 or 30 points in other games. But they had some coverage busts, so that wasn't fun. But honestly, that was a game that was closer than it should have been, because Jordan Tyson, who's just an excellent player for ASU. He had a pick, contributed to a pick that was literally on his hands right as he was about to go into the end zone, and then Kansas picks it off. So that's like a 7-10 point swing. He also had a really dumb fumble. So even though that game came down to the wire, ASU like was consistently like gaining 5 yards on them. So it kind of was a weird game. And then the Utah game was enormous. Levitt gets injured in that game. And that contributed to the loss at Cincinnati, but he was able to finish it out, and Scadaboo did the rest with 2 outstanding touchdown runs at Cincinnati. That was a 9 a.m. start is not easy for these West Coast teams, even if it's a 10 a.m. start Mountain Time, like they did everything they could in terms of getting there early and all that. But I feel like the 9 a.m. start contributed a little bit. Cincinnati's a decent team. And then, not having Levitt obviously hurt. Oklahoma State, that game. I mean, Oklahoma State sucks. They're like just not good. The weird thing with that game is that there was a huge weather delay. So I was honestly, ASU was up 21-14 at half, and I was hoping like just cancel the game, like just cancel the second half. We win. I don't care. Like, let's just get this win in the win column, So that was a big win just to clinch bowl eligibility and not have that hang over your head, like what Nebraska's going through right now, honestly. And then the UCF game, this is probably the game that ASU stole the most. There was a blocked punt, a 1 yard pick six, which is still just one of the craziest sequences I've seen. And then the offense did just enough to get the job done, and the defense made some timely stops. But, RJ Harvey and weirdly, UCF's Rizek is like their best quarterback, their 4th stringer. But that was just a really big win to just get notched in, just to keep the good vibes going, even if it wasn't their best performance. And then last week at Kansas State was awesome. I mean, that first half was incredible to watch as an ASU fan, honestly. Like, just to go and beat a quality team, beat them physically, stopped Kansas State on it was a 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. They just ran it up both times, and ASU stopped them both times. Like, it was a really impressive performance. And, the second half got a little hairy, but ultimately ASU was the better team. So, and now we have, the biggest home game in Sun Devil Stadium in, I'd say, 10 years, when they hosted a top 10 matchup against Notre Dame in 2014. There was a game against, we all see the highlights of that game against Oregon with Jaden Daniels and Ayuk. The issue is that ASU team entered that game at 5-5. So it was an excellent result, but it ultimately wasn't the difference in them, winning a conference or not or something. So
right, the impact, the meaning on the season is
high. Exactly. It was a nice moment. Like, ASU has had some nice. I think ASU's beaten in that time frame like a top 10 Washington team. They did in 2017, I believe, and then they did it in 2022. So they beat a top 10 Oregon team. Like, they've shown that, but the difference is it's all coming in like a 5-7 or 7-5 season. So it's like, oh, it's a nice win, but it's equivalent to Arkansas beating Tennessee this year. It's like, good win, it's better to win that game than not win it, but it ultimately doesn't portend to anything bigger,
Yeah. Well, I have to say, so ASU has been a hard one to put kind of a finger on the pulse of this team, because I remember early in the season looking at the out of conference schedule and seeing Mississippi State kind of come out flat and then a loss to Texas Tech. It kind of felt like, every time you had a big win, then it would come out after the fact that, okay, maybe they weren't that good after all. And so it's hard to measure how good is ASU based on who ASU has played versus BYU struggled by SMU. And it turns out SMU is blown out by other opponents. Right. So in retrospect, that ended up actually, we look back and they're like, oh, that was a better win than we realized at the time.
Did they play, because I know SMU's had some quarterback, did they play Stone in that game, or did they switch it with Stone and Jennings?
Right. So that was the game plan. The first 2 possessions, they started with Stone and they had negative yardage, and they switched to Jennings full time for the rest of that. But that wasn't a true starter because they were still doing 2 quarterbacks at that time.
Right.
So I think they had in their game plan, we're going to play some snaps with Stone, some with Jennings. So,
and that was like a low scoring close win too. So like,
yeah,
who knows how that could have gone, otherwise, but yeah.
Yeah. It was definitely a close one.
It all counts the same though. Right. But yeah.
Yeah, a win's a win, and we'll take. I mean, just like the Kansas one, which was for BYU this last week, which we'll talk about the significance of that. But that was a weird one because my daughter was in the ER, so I actually missed most of the game. But then I caught just broken bone, but ended up catching the fourth quarter. But after going back and rewatching, even knowing the outcome of the game, I was watching this game, and even though it was a close score, I was like, BYU's got this game in control. Like they've definitely got Kansas out of sync. It's BYU's playing their game plan. And so for them to still come up short is really painful when that happens. And now it's setting up what is basically a pre-playoff game. I mean, this is essentially a playoff game for both BYU and ASU to keep. Technically, both teams are still alive. Can still be alive if they lose this game, but you're going to need a lot of help to make it. I mean, probably not, right? So like both
definitely not. I mean, ASU would have 3 conference losses already. Like they would need so much BS to happen because you guys it would still be your second conference loss, right? Like it would still be more feasible.
But, yeah. So you would need, I think, I mean, even if Colorado wins out, you just need BYU to lose against Houston, which is not out of the realm of possibility. You'd need Kansas State to beat ISU in Farmageddon.
And then we would have to beat U of A.
Yeah.
I guess it is possible, but yeah.
Yeah, and a similar thing for BYU. And so it's crazy that it's all come down to this because I will say, obviously, before the season, BYU fans, I think we were all looking at this like, we just want to make a bowl game. Some people were saying, I think 8 wins. I was like, that's kind of like the upper limit. Like, I think 6, maybe 7 if things go well. But we're all circling our calendar like this ASU game we're going to need, if we're going to do it. And now it's come down to no. Like both of us are competing at the top of the conference for a spot in the conference championship. So it's really cool to see that turnaround. And that's part of the fun of this conference is, all the back and forth. And every year it seems like new teams are popping up. Obviously ASU is a new team to the conference, but not projected to win it. However, it's not great look for the conference as a whole. We can, even though the SEC, when they have parity, they say, oh, it's because we're all good. When the Big 12 has parity, it's because they're all bad. So there's still that double standard there. But so it has been a wild one watching ASU because it's so funny how quickly in the season we realized that's actually going to be a tougher one than we realized. And so it's going to be, and now with both teams playing with so much at stake for both teams. I mean, we were really rooting for Kansas State last week because we have a tiebreaker over them with the head-to-head and want to get ASU out of the way. And now it's really all coming down to this. It's going to be a tough one. It's a home game for you guys. So you
guys are going to have a contingent there though. That's for sure.
Yes. BYU does travel well anywhere, but especially Arizona where there's a large,
They can take the light rail from Mesa. Like you don't even have to go. You don't have to get in a car potentially. So yeah.
I mean, have you been to – I'm trying to think when the last time BYU has played down there.
I haven't. No, I don't have.
No, you haven't been to a game. I know we've played more Arizona a little bit more over recent years. I know we played you guys, but that was in Provo somewhat recently. But, yeah.
That game was one of probably the most frustrating ASU loss because, it was clear we didn't practice for crowd noise. We had 10 false starts in that game. And it was just because I still had hope for that team. That was the last good roster of the Herm Edwards era. Yeah. That was the last year of Jaden Daniels. We had some good defensive players. You had Rashad White and I just don't know how you're Herm Edwards and you coach at Arrowhead Stadium in your career and you just don't have your team prepared for crowd noise. It just blows my mind, among many other things of that era.
Well, I will say it's ASU is not the only one that's happened to there in Provo, especially at a night game.
That's true.
I will say though that was probably the one it seemed to impact the most. I mean, you had almost the 4 back-to-back or something.
Exactly. it looks so much worse than like a usual when a team goes to a hostile road environment. It was like double the impact, which anyway. But,
it was great for us, but not so much for you. But it's fun now that we're back in the same conference after well before our time.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And I mean, I don't have the whole history of the WAC and all that. And I know that they've played in the 90s too. But that is one of the things with this conference is like there are some games. Like I'm a sicko. I'm going to go to all the games. But like I'm single. I don't have kids. I don't have any like things, pulling me away. So it's completely different. But like, when you have UCF come to town, there's no connective tissue. And a lot of older fans are like, oh, is this a group of 5 team coming into town? Like they don't have the background of playing them for years. And so I'm glad that at least we have this little Western contingent, and I kind of would throw Texas Tech in there too.
Yeah.
Like it is kind of cool that you have like at least some, natural rivals. And I think BYU, it depends which ASU fan you ask. Like they're probably our second biggest rival for a good chunk of the fan base, either them or Utah, one of those two, but definitely top 3.
Yeah. What do you think about, because a lot of people talked about a renewed rivalry with Texas Tech, but when it's been so long since it's really been a rivalry, do you guys view that as a...
No, that's not, yeah. It's kind of like, I kind of feel like they just fit in. They're like, it's the same as playing like I don't know, like Cal or Oregon State, where it's like it fits, like it makes sense that you're playing them, but it's not like, oh, like huge rival, because like I mean they didn't play, like it's been a long time since they played regularly. So, and the other thing with the Big 12 is like you miss teams all the time, so that does, I mean, I guess that's every conference, but. So that, I guess I would just say it's more of like a normal conference mate, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the rivalries continue to kind of develop and form. That's been one of the things we're excited about, especially being independent for so long, is seeing it kind of, being back in a conference and enjoying that and watching those natural rivalries kind of form. But so you mentioned Herm Edwards. Obviously, ASU now has a different head coach, Kenny Dillingham. So tell us a little bit about him, the impact he's had on the program, his kind of what is the identity that he's instilling in his teams.
Yeah, well, I'll say this in terms of the identity. Like this team is a lot more physical than I think a lot of people expected. You saw that in their win against Kansas State, Oklahoma State. You saw that, and I think that's not something you expect from like a 34-year-old. He's not like some stereotypical like former defensive coordinator meathead guy. Where you kind of expect the physicality to come with that. So then another thing is they've been really good in the fourth quarters of these games, and it does speak to me. Like I think their conditioning is pretty dang good compared to the average team. You saw that against Kansas. You saw that against UCF. So I don't know how that translates against every team, but that's stuck out to me. And then just as him, you just see the energy. You see he is a product of this current coaching world. And I think the fact that he's adaptable and he's able to he's a grinder, man. He's only a few years older than me, but I can't imagine having all that energy every day. And so like he's been able to help build the NIL budget, which our past leadership didn't believe in that. So it was like basically building from nothing. And then just him and our new athletic director, Graham Rossini, kind of making good relationships with some of the big businesses in the Valley, the ones that are interested in helping out ASU football. And so that's been big, and just and also having a clear recruiting identity. And I think that's pretty big in the Big 12 because, like it or not, other teams are going to downgrade the Big 12 when they're recruiting events against a Big 12 team. Like if you're Washington and you're coming to a kid and like, hey, we're playing in the Big 10, we're playing Ohio State, we're playing Michigan, all this. You want to put, like, and I don't love it, but I mean, if I were in their shoes, I would do the same thing, right? Like, so I think it's smart that Dillingham is uber focusing on AZ, knowing that you're not going to get every kid immediately because some kids just want to go out of state. That's just how it is. And there's always, for whatever reason. But now you're starting to see that Arizona recruiting pick up a bit as he's established good relationship with the coaches. And then he's focusing a lot on Texas, just a ton on Texas because it makes sense with the Big 12 connection. And then really going after, how do I phrase this? Like a strong emphasis on recruiting the Polynesian community as well. So, and that a lot of that stems from their offensive line coach, Saga Tuatele. And, a lot of those guys are younger, but I think they've grabbed some good offensive line prospects through that. So the thing with Dillingham is it stuck out that like he has a plan for what he wants to do here. And ASU is it's a unique school. It's because people look on the outside and like, oh, it should be incredible. Like it should be this awesome, blue blood football program. And it's not, I mean, maybe that'll happen down the road, but I don't there are some impediments stopping that, right? Like the fan base is not like, it's really awesome right now, but like, it's not like a Nebraska fan base where like, oh, we have this sellout street. It's like, it's not that. Being in a city it has its pluses and benefits for a football program, but like the pluses is when you're rolling, like everyone gets behind you. But the downside is like, if you're not rolling, like people will find other things to do, and that's not even like I feel like you kind of see that across the country. I know a lot of times that gets branded on like the West Coast, but I mean, you see that at Miami, right? You see that at Georgia Tech, do they have this raucous, they have, so I think that factors in and just stuff like that. But Dillingham grew up as an ASU fan. So like, I think it's good to have someone who understands the unique benefits of ASU and the kind of unique detriments, not downsides of ASU, I guess. So I think that's a really good thing to have. Cause I think a lot of coaches come in and it's like, I don't know, they just think it can run on autopilot, and it can run on autopilot, but you'll just go 7-5 all the time. And that's not the worst reality, but it's also like, it's not getting anyone like super hyped up either,
Right. Because this is year 2, right? With Dillingham. And it's crazy because, usually you look for this type of performance in a season in year 3. Like year 1, everyone's okay. There's a lot of change. And then year 2, you're kind of like Cincy where they're at. Like building, it's just not quite there yet. You think, oh, next year they'll be dangerous. And so to kind of be a step ahead is really impressive. So let's go to that because I think there's a couple key pieces there. Let's start on the offensive side. So you have Levitt, the QB, who was recruited by BYU. He has some family ties there. Doesn't seem like he was really ever interested in BYU. He's done really well. And then obviously Scadabu, who in a conference that I think is really deep at the running back position, might be the best of all of them. So tell us a little bit about this offense and what, I guess, how it looks, what they're kind of built on, and what we should expect to see on Saturday.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, Levitt has been incredible. He's been such a great addition to this team. And, when he came to ASU I think it was like last December, early January, Rashada was still on the team and everyone kind of looked at it like, that's interesting. Another redshirt freshman coming in at the quarterback position, someone who was fairly he was a 4-star recruit out of high school. He wasn't like a, Elite 11 guy or whatever, but he was well, I mean, he got a scholarship to go to Michigan State. It's not like he was some, complete afterthought. But he also wasn't like some huge name either. And so he comes in, Rashada gets injured in the off season, moving moving apartments. He had there was some, the story goes, there's some nails that were in the corner of a box that he was picking up and so that's this. It also that also sounds like something that is a cover for a dumber injury, but we'll never know. And then Levitt starts out well at camp, and Rashada comes back and is like clearly behind him. So that's why Rashada left. Sticking with Levitt, his speed and his acceleration has kept ASU alive in so many games, has helped ASU get off to good starts. He's picked up a few third and mediums, third and longs, just by just getting to the corner, getting to that first down marker. He did it against Utah in 2 big drives. So he's very quick to decide when a passing concept isn't working, to just okay, I'm getting 4 yards or whatever. And I think that's really been such a big part of his game. And now as he's improved as a passer, it's really starting to pay dividends, because defenses are so scared of him throwing it to Jordan Tyson mostly. Jordan Tyson has been a revelation as well. If you remember, he was the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year in 2022.
Okay.
Offensive freshman on that the Colorado team that came before Dion.
Okay.
The 1-11 disaster. But he came to ASU last year. He had a torn ACL and MCL. So he basically didn't play last year. And we didn't know really what to expect from him. We knew this guy was talented. And then as the season's gone along, he's just been so reliable. Really can hit you deep passes, dig routes over the middle, and then screens. He can just do it all. And that connection with those two is really kind of been the underrated story of the season, because Scadaboo gets so much attention. He's such a highlight reel of a running back too. It's not just that he is efficient and all that. He's also just athletic, and the way he breaks tackles is insane. Even in games where he doesn't he'll have 1 or 2 truck stick moments, even if he doesn't have great stats. So Scadaboo has definitely been a huge key in some of their wins. But in these last, I'd say 2 weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, Levitt and Tyson have just been mind melded. Obviously Scadaboo, incredible. He's been very consistent. He hasn't really had any, last week he was kind of bottled up a little bit, but that's a good K-State run defense too.
Mm-hmm.
So, BYU is a good run defense as well. So it'll be a challenge again, but you always trust Scadaboo back there. And he's also he's an incredible pass catching running back. He had a great over the shoulder reception on a third and long against Utah when ASU was only up by 1 point at that point in the game. So, and it led to a 50-yard touchdown run by him. So, I think he should be a little more healthier than he was last week. And he's definitely in the mix for the best Big 12 running back. I'd say either him or Harvey at UCF, who is excellent. He's been excellent. Some of their Kyson Brown, their backup running back, is a good number 2 guy to have in there. And then the underrated story of the season, and the biggest detriment to their season last year, is the offensive line. They've stayed fairly healthy, which again, last year was a disaster. In their second game last year, they lost both their tackles, for one for the year and another for a good chunk of the season. And it was already a not great unit to begin with. And then you lose both your tackles, and you have immobile backup quarterbacks, and that didn't go well. And this year, they've just been really good, and it helps that Levitt can get out of sacks, because they have gotten, defenses do get pressure at times, but they've generally done a good job in pass protection. And their center Leaf Fautanu and left guard Ben Coleman are both. I think Leaf Fautanu will definitely get drafted, and Coleman has a chance to. They've just been really solid on the inside, and that's been just such a big. We're just not talking about the offensive line that much, and that's a very good thing. So, yeah.
Well, you'd have to. Yes, it takes a good running back, but to be able to have that kind of run game, you still have to have a good offensive line, spring them loose. So, looking at it, just at these game highs, and with Scadaboo, obviously there's no surprise to see the kind of numbers he puts up. Now, in both losses, he had below 100 rushing yards.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've won a couple games where he's been below 100 as well. But what really stood out to me is that he is has the most receiving yards in several of these games as well. So generally Tyson, but Scadaboo has, I think, 3 games where he led in receiving. So are most of those like kind of your check down dump off pass, and then he just breaks loose in the flat, or how is he getting, or is he really kind of going out and
I would say mostly, I'd say like 60%, dump off short passes.
Mhm.
But he's had a few. He had the one against Utah that was over the shoulder. He had a few in the Texas Tech game that were, I don't know, like slants, I guess. So it's not like they're sending out on like go routes or whatever, but they involve him in the passing game in many ways. And it's, I think, a little bit more early in the year when Levitt was still coming into his own, and you want to trust a guy like Scadaboo.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a big part of it. Again, he's great at breaking tackles, and that contributed to some of his high receiving yardage totals as well. So,
yeah, it's funny how popular he's gotten across, all college football fans. They all kind of enjoy watching him. He's one of those kinds of players. So, not one you like to go up against, though. So, yeah, BYU has struggled a little bit. Well, we've done really well with the run game. We've had to really focus on it. But I think what's different about ASU is you have an elite running back, but then you also have a very potent passing attack. So it's a little bit harder to just stack the box and do that. You really, because then you're leaving your guys out there on an island, which BYU has done from time to time. But it seems like Levitt might be one of those guys that can make BYU pay. So switching sides. So tell me a little bit about this ASU defense. I was looking at the scores of these games. It seems like they're kind of all over the place. So what should we expect to see from this defense?
I think the defense will play well. I think they played an excellent game last week against K-State. Linebackers and safeties are probably their 2 best units. They've dealt with some injuries in the linebacker core, and it hasn't really affected them. Between Keyshawn Elliott is really good, number 44. Caleb McCullough, number 22, is a really good player and has been on this team for like 5 years, one of the few guys that stuck through it all. Jordan Crook, Arkansas transfer, has been a real big addition in the second half. He was injured earlier in the year. And then Cyrus Fiaseu out of San Diego State chips in as well. Safeties have been really good. The trio of – so Shamari Simmons is actually a nickel, but he had a pick and contributed to the first interception by Johnson with a tip. So he's a really good player, effective player. Xavier Alford is kind of your typical free safety guy, and he's excellent player as well. Has limited a lot of big plays for ASU. And then Miles Ghost Rouser, New Mexico State transfer. This dude is a heat-seeking missile, and there's usually about one play a game where he just lights someone up. So their safeties are good. Defensive line got off to a strong start to the year. They've kind of didn't have a great game against UCF, but I'd say ultimately they've done their job. Defensive tackles have been pretty good. The sacks haven't come quite as much as they did in the beginning of the year, but some of that's just playing Avery Johnson last week. And even though they got pressure on him, it was still tougher to bring him down. And I know Retzlaff, he's not like the most mobile guy out there, but he can do enough, right? He's clearly got some mobility. So that'll be a big kind of chess match to watch through the game. But I mean, there are some talented guys like Clayton Smith is a good pass rusher. Prince Dorp is a good pass rusher. So, and then get some pressure with their interior guys too. So it's not like the thing with this defense is like, it's not like an elite defense, but they're solid. Right. And I think when you look through their results, right, like they've given up 30 or more points in 3 games. 2 of those games they've won. And none of those games, it's all 30 or 31. It's not like they're really getting lit up. They've at least been able to, get a few stops in a game, right? Even if they're not playing that well. And then against, in some other games, they've just played really well. Like last week, they played really well against Utah, against Cam Rising. So, however, I don't know what to make of that. Like, I guess he's better than Wilson, but And even against Cincinnati, I mean, they gave up 24 points early. One of those was off a short field due to a Scatterboo fumble. So they played pretty well against Cincinnati, honestly, and against Oklahoma State played well, gave up a garbage time score that didn't matter. So this defense gives them a chance every game. And I think that's kind of similar to BYU, right? Like, I mean, I don't think you guys have had many really bad defensive performances. Maybe the game against Oklahoma State, but I'd say it's two pretty good defenses, but neither defense is like elite, where they're just getting like three and outs in a row or something.
Yeah, we struggle a little bit on getting teams off the field on third down sometimes, but so I guess. Well, I actually touched upon that. So, what about special teams? Is there anything noteworthy there for ASU?
Yeah, so special teams has been interesting this year. The kicking game it started out okay, actually, and our kicker, Ian Hershey, actually made two. It was like a 45-yarder and a 47-yarder against Mississippi State, and those turned out to be pretty important kicks as the game went on. But as the year went on, it just started to miss kicks. We were missing extra points. Against Kansas, we had a 33-yard field goal blocked, which is embarrassing for a short field goal. That kept the game closer than it should have been. Against Utah, we had an early extra point missed, and that in a game you win by 8 points, that's a pretty enormous missed extra point. So it didn't ultimately end up mattering. Against Cincinnati, missed as they were kind of making a comeback. They missed two field goals late. Both were shanked. And so that's what got Dillingham. Probably had his worst moment of the year. It was like, yeah, our kicking was really bad. It was atrocious. Shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have said it like that. So anyway, but since then, they've been leaning on Parker Lewis, who was a former USC kicker, former 5-star recruit as a kicker. I don't know what that means, but he has the leg. And, this past week against Kansas State, they, 21-0 in the first half. And then on the first drive of the second half, they get down into 47-yard field goal, and Lewis nailed it. And that turned out to be an enormous kick in the course of the game. And I think the kicking situation is settled now in the sense that like Parker Lewis may not make every field goal, but like he at least looks like a real field goal kicker. It's not like a anything could happen disaster type scenario. And so like, he's going to get the kick up. So I'm glad that's kind of been settled for the most part. Otherwise on special teams, it hasn't really been much, which I think is a good thing. We have a freshman punter in Canyon Floyd. He's improved as the season's gone along, but doesn't have like an enormous leg so far. And then, 2 weeks ago against UCF, that block punt was an enormous play. I mean, you win a game by 4 points, and you have a block punt touchdown, right? Like that was in just a huge play in that game. And it does show that special teams are kind of starting to come together. So I wouldn't say – I'd say it was actually kind of a weakness for this team earlier in the year. And now I'd say it's something you don't really think about too much. Because they actually, against Texas Tech, they had 2 kickoffs out of bounds, which is – I don't care what level of football you're in. Like, that cannot happen, Like, So it seems like it's more of a non-issue. We haven't had the crazy snap issues like Kansas State. So I'd say things have been settled, although you don't really trust the field goal kicking, but you trust it to be competent now when it was not before.
Right. I'd completely forgotten about those comments that he made about
it was not a good look. It was not a good look. And like, he wasn't wrong in his like analysis because of how the kicks looked in that game, but you also just can't act like that, and I think he's a lesson from that. So
Yeah, I mean, he's still a young coach. I mean, he's younger than me, so you know,
Yeah.
he's got time to. I mean, there's a lot of
Oh,
season.
it was definitely an emotional outburst. Like, that was
Yeah,
clear.
I was gonna say because he's come across pretty well so far. I mean, I don't know a lot about him. I think you know he's still pretty new on the scene, but in terms of this job and head coach, but um, he yeah, so he's come across really well. But that was it seemed like kind of an uncharacteristic moment. But like I
Yeah.
said, there's a lot more seasoned coaches that say dumber things all the time. I
Yes,
mean, just look at
exactly.
Dundee or you know some of these other guys. So that one was at least funny. So although I feel bad for him,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
Mike Gundy, that's not even like in the top 5 of things he
Yeah,
said this year.
yeah,
At least Kenny Dillingham wasn't like, our fan base is poor, and that's why they suck.
yeah.
That was still funny to me. Anyway.
Yeah. So, all right. So, pretty good overall assessment of what we're looking at, and BYU's going up against this weekend. It's going to be a heck of a game for both teams, which is
Yeah,
funny because I have to say I don't do a lot of engaging with people and trash talking and stuff, but I can't remember what it
same.
was this summer before the season even started, and there was just some ASU fan. I don't even remember who. Maybe it was you. No, I doubt it. That was just popping off and saying dumb stuff, and I had
Was it?
said something. I don't remember what, but it's just I don't know if I was just crabby that day or if he was just especially annoying. I really can't remember the conversation, but I had said something, and I remember at the time thinking to myself, I was like, I hope this doesn't come back to bite me in the butt. I've just jinxed us in that game, and so now with everything on the line, I'm really worried that I may have jinxed BYU going into this. So because nobody was expecting ASU to or BYU to be where they're at.
Yeah.
So having said all that, what do you think? What's your like final score prediction for this game?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit. So spoiler, I do think ASU is going to win. I'm just kind of thinking of like what kind of game. I think both defenses will make their presence known in this game. I think it'll be kind of like a 14-13 type score at half, give or take who's leading. But I have ASU winning this game 27-20. I think I just think ASU is going to be able to pull away in the second half. And there's a part of me that this isn't like hardcore football analysis, but there's a part of me that just feels like BYU has peaked this year. And whether or not they had lost last week, I feel like it just feels like a really good spot for ASU. So it'll be a close game. I don't think BYU is going to get like run off the field. I mean, playing them after a loss, like I kind of would rather play them. I know it's better for ASU and the whole conference race type thing that they lost last week, but there were a good chunk of ASU fans who wanted that to be an undefeated BYU team coming in. That would have made it a little bit more special because it would have been playing a top 10 team. But you know, whatever. It is what it is. So yeah, I think it'll be a good game though. Like I think there will be a lot of momentum swings, but in the end, I think ASU will be able to make a few more plays at the end.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I'm kind of similar. I don't know if I'm just splitting the difference because ASU does have some games that are lower scoring, generally high scoring team though. But I think for BYU to win this one, it's going to require slowing ASU down. And I do think BYU's offense has slowed down a little, whereas ASU does seem to be peaking right now. I mean, winning the UCF game, although granted they were going cross country, but without Scadaboo, and then you had the Kansas State game, which was actually more of a beatdown than the final score indicates. Yeah, definitely playing good ball and definitely playing confident, which was
Yes.
another reason why we wanted Kansas State to win, is just to kind of have a team that's got kind of punch in the face a little. But BYU, the one thing I'll say about them this year is the way they've responded to adversity.
Yeah.
Generally, up until going through that Utah game, which that was a major rivalry game. You know how those get, and to have
Right.
that, and then to come back and play, that's not an excuse, but it is. I think it is a real thing. Now BYU, I still think should have won that game, which is what, again, I don't want to get into that. So I do think BYU can come. This should be a good game. I think both teams are capable of winning this if the closest score is close, or either team could run away with it if things go right. I think it's just one of those weird games. But yeah, my prediction, not completely made up. I do think BYU we'll probably have a couple field goals. So that's why I was thinking like 27 to like 24 or something like that. Like I do think it's going to be kind of a just kind of I don't think either team's going to get completely shut down, but I'm hoping for BYU's sake, it does not become a major shootout.
Yeah, that probably would benefit ASU, but we'll see. It's that's why they play the games, as they say. So
that is why they play the game. And regardless, well, yeah, I mean, and this obviously has huge impacts. Everybody's going to be watching the outcome of this game because it's going to impact how a slew of other teams, whether they still have a chance of getting in or not. Because some teams need, I think, like both BYU and Colorado to lose both their final games. And then they need some other stuff they need a lot of things to happen just to get in, but they're still technically alive. Right now, both ASU and BYU control their own destiny. So should be a very good one. So anyway, well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you let us know where everyone can find all your content?
Yeah, for sure. Just follow. I should have put the Stomp the Bus in my little introduction window.
I'll have it in the comments.
Yeah, it's at Stomp the Bus Pod on X. We record once a week, usually on Wednesday nights. Actually, just me and my college buddy Colton Dodgson. We just kind of just talk about ASU from a fan's perspective, like we all do on the College Huddle. So, yeah, please like and subscribe, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. It's fun just kind of talking ball, and yeah, I mean. This whole new trip to the Big 12 has been an interesting one, and I'm just so glad that we're having for one, like it feels like even if ASU does lose this game, I doubt they lose to U of A. I just doubt they lose to U of A no matter what, but especially if they lose this game. So there's a good likelihood of ASU finishing 9-3, which would almost certainly get them ranked. And there's that, and just having a huge game like this at the end of the year is just so fun. So it should be a picturesque day. We'll be all sorts of fans of both teams there. So I'm excited.
Yeah, worst case scenario, I keep telling myself that. Worst case scenario, you're still playing meaningful ball in November, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Sometimes it's tough, like when the loss comes in the year. Like if you guys lost like some closer game earlier in the year, and then now you were coming in at one loss, you would feel so much differently than had it been last week.
It's so stupid. Yeah. And Kansas has a bad record, but they're
better than their record
team, and they're better. They've lost a lot and won a lot of. They've been in a lot of close games, almost all of them. So and BYU's been in a few. In some ways, it's kind of a regression to the mean. But anyway, I should have asked you this up top. What real quick? What is the meaning behind the Stomp the Bus podcast?
So when teams come to ASU, they play a video introduction hype video, and it's Sparky walking, like a giant Sparky walking around Phoenix. He walks around downtown, walks on the highway, and then as he's walking into Sun Devil Stadium, he stomps the bus of the opposing team as he throws the pitchfork down into the field. So that's what it's after. So it's just basically an inside joke, I guess.
All right. Well, yeah, usually they are, and they're relevant to the fandom, and unless you're on the inside, you don't know. So I'm always curious to.
No, I had the same question. I went on the Kansas State podcast last week, the Cocaine Willie. I'm like,
yeah.
So it was just because their old logo looks, super hyperactive, I guess. So okay, that's a much more PG reason than what it actually could have been. So.
Yeah, I asked them the same thing when we played them. So sweet. All right, man. Well, thanks so much. Good luck, not this weekend, but for the rest of the season afterwards. And
likewise.
All right. Go Cougs.
See ya.